At the family reunion, my brother said, "You do not really belong anymore. That is just reality." My mom patted my shoulder. "Still, thank you for booking everything." I just said, "Of course." That night, I contacted the event vendor, canceled the equipment rental, and revoked my insurance authorization. At 9:17 a.m., the grill never arrived. No speakers, no tables. "What did you do?" I replied, disengaged from a non-belonging. At 2:33 p.m., I got a voicemail from my dad. "I have not deleted it yet." "You don't really belong anymore," Mason said casually, stuffing a handful of chips into his mouth like he hadn't just punched a hole in my chest. I stood there holding a tray of barbecue chicken I had grilled myself. My shirt was soaked with sweat. My back ached from hauling equipment since dawn. And that's what he chose to say. "No thank you. No appreciation. Just that. That's just reality," he added, shrugging. I opened my mouth, but before I could respond, Mom walked over and gently patted my shoulder, her face already turning away from me. "Still, thank you for booking everything, sweetie," she said softly. "You really helped make it all happen." And then she walked off, her hand already in the chip bowl Mason was hogging. I stood frozen for a second, watching my siblings laugh near the rented photo booth I'd organized. One cousin tripped over a speaker wire, a speaker I'd paid for, and no one even glanced at me. I forced a smile. "Of course," I muttered to no one. That night, while everyone posted group pictures with captions like #FamilyFirst and #ReunionLove, I was on my phone canceling every remaining invoice. At 9:17 the next morning, the messages began. "The grill never arrived? Where are the tables? Bro, what did you do?" I texted back one line. "Disengaged from a non-belonging." At 2:33 p.m., my father left me a voicemail. I haven't deleted it. Growing up, I was the default adult in the family long before I turned 18. Mason? He was the charming one, the golden boy. He got drunk at 16, crashed Dad's car, and still somehow walked away with a pat on the back and a new phone that Christmas. I, on the other hand, once forgot to defrost the chicken and got a full-blown lecture about taking responsibility and being dependable. So I became dependable. By 20, I was working full-time while studying at night, helping Dad with his taxes, and driving Mom to her physical therapy sessions. When Uncle Joe lost his job, I was the one who lent him $2,000, money I never saw again. I didn't complain. That's what family does, right? Over the years, that role hardened around me like concrete. At first, I thought they appreciated it. "We don't know what we'd do without you," Mom used to say. But as time passed, those words turned into expectations, then into silence, then into entitlement. I didn't notice it happening. Not really. It was a slow drift. One day you're helping out because you care. The next, you're the one expected to foot the reunion bill, organize your cousin's baby shower, and co-sign a loan for your sister's second attempt at a bakery. You're no longer a person, you're a resource. That's exactly what happened with the family reunion. Mom called me in early April. Her voice was chipper, rehearsed. "We're thinking of doing something special this summer. A big family gathering. Like old times. You're so good at organizing these things." Translation: "You'll do all the work, and we'll show up to eat." Still, part of me wanted to say yes. I hadn't seen some of my cousins in years. And maybe, just maybe, if I did enough, if I pulled this off, they'd finally see me again. Not as the fixer or the financier, just as a part of them. So I did it. Booked the park, secured the vendor permits, arranged chair rentals, grill delivery, speaker system, porta potties, first aid support, and even set up an insurance policy in case something went wrong. Spent nearly $3,800 from my savings. I didn't ask anyone to chip in. I knew better. As the day approached, the group chat filled with messages about who was bringing what side dish. No one asked about the bigger logistics, the stuff they just assumed would magically happen. One cousin even joked, "Well, at least we have our event planner." I laughed with a thumbs-up emoji. But it stung. The morning of the reunion, I was up at 5:30, loading my car with gear. When I arrived at the park, no one else was there. Mason showed up 2 hours later, freshly shaved, in a linen shirt, holding 2 cases of soda like he was some kind of hero. "Yo," he said, tossing a Coke my way. "You always take this stuff too seriously." I wanted to say, "You're welcome," but I just nodded. People trickled in. Laughter echoed. I fired up the grill, adjusted the speakers, handed out allergy-safe name tags for the kids. I kept thinking, maybe this time will feel different. Then Mason said what he said. You don't really belong anymore. That's just reality. No anger. No hesitation. Just that blank, smug calm he'd mastered years ago. I stared at him, blinking through the smoke from the ribs I just flipped. What? I said. He gestured at the picnic tables, filled with cousins and kids. You're not really in this family the way you used to be. You're more like background now. A helper, but not one of us. I opened my mouth, but he was already walking away. That's when Mom came by, patted my shoulder, didn't look me in the eye, and whispered, still, thank you for booking everything. Still, like she had heard Mason, like she agreed. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't the invisible one anymore. I was beneath that. I was their infrastructure, the person who quietly makes the party happen, then fades out of the pictures. It hadn't always been this obvious. But now, standing there in the July heat, it crystallized. The years I missed birthdays to cover their emergencies. The vacations I never took because someone needed help. The silence when I was laid off and none of them even asked how I was doing. Mason was right. I didn't belong anymore. Not in their version of this family. And maybe I never did. But this time, I wasn't going to swallow it. This time, I had already started thinking, what if I pulled the plug? I looked at the rentals list saved in my phone. I still had full authorization. It wasn't too late. By midnight, I had made the calls. They wouldn't feel my absence. They would feel the absence of everything I used to give them. The next morning started with silence. Then came the chaos. At exactly 9:17 a.m., I was sipping black coffee in my kitchen, scrolling through headlines on my phone, when the first message hit the group chat. Hey, anyone know where the grill is? The rental truck never came. A few seconds later, no tables here either. Did the vendor flake? Then Mason, where is everything? I set my mug down slowly. Notifications exploded on my screen. I let them pile up. No speakers either. No tents. Are we still on? Did someone mess up the times? What's going on? I waited. At 9:34 a.m., my aunt called me directly. Ignored. At 9:38, my mother. Sweetie, did something go wrong? Please call me. Then at 9:41, Mason again, this time directly. Dude, this is a disaster. What did you do? That's when I replied. Just one line. Disengaged from a non-belonging. And muted the chat. By noon, they were in full meltdown. Photos from the park surfaced in the family group. Plastic chairs hastily pulled from car trunks. Foil trays balanced on the back of someone's SUV. Toddlers whining in the heat. People arguing near an unlit charcoal pit. My cousin Tommy posted, worst reunion ever. I went for a walk. At 2:33 p.m., my phone buzzed. Voicemail. Dad. I didn't answer, but I didn't delete it either. I sat in my apartment that night, lights dimmed, phone flipped screen down on the counter, letting the silence breathe around me. I wasn't angry anymore. Not exactly. I was done. Done being the backbone that no one saw. Done holding up a structure that never had space for me inside. Done being useful instead of loved. 2 days passed before someone showed up at my door. Mason. He didn't even knock, just banged on the door like it owed him something. When I opened it, he barged in before I could say anything. What is wrong with you? He snapped. I raised an eyebrow. Good to see you too. You humiliated everyone. Mom's been crying nonstop. People are saying it was the worst family event we've ever had. I'm flattered, I said. Didn't know they remembered I existed. Mason ignored that. You had one job. You were in charge. And you bailed. I didn't bail, I said evenly. I exited. Same difference. No, I said. There's a difference between failing and choosing to stop feeding a system that erases you. He stared at me, genuinely confused. I sighed and walked past him into the kitchen. Tell me something, Mason. When was the last time any of you asked how I'm doing? Not what I can do for you. Not what I can organize. Just me. He didn't answer. I continued. When I lost my job last year and was barely affording rent, did you call? Silence. When Mom needed help with her medical bills, who covered her deductible? I did. Without a word. Did anyone thank me? No. But she cried because her meatballs got cold last Sunday. Stop making this about you, he barked. I spun around. It is about me. It's been about not being allowed to make anything about me for the last 10 years. Mason's expression shifted from outrage to unease. I was the bank, the coordinator, the emergency contact. but never the son, never the brother, never just family. And you said it yourself, I don't belong. So I stopped pretending I do. He scoffed. So this is revenge. No, I said, voice low. This is boundaries. For once, Mason didn't have a comeback. He shifted awkwardly, picking at the seam on his jacket sleeve. Finally, he muttered, Mom's not doing well. She was doing fine, patting my shoulder like a stranger. He opened his mouth again, then closed it. You should go, I said. He stood there a beat longer, then walked out. I thought that would be the end of it. But the fallout had just begun. 3 days later, my mother showed up. She didn't come alone. Dad was with her. That was rare. They usually sent texts, passive-aggressive voicemails, or notes through Mason. But now they were at my door, together. I let them in. Mom's eyes were red. She looked tired. Dad stood rigid, arms crossed. I don't know what's happening, Mom said first. You're not answering messages. You left us hanging. Did I? I said. Her lip trembled. We didn't mean to make you feel left out. Stop, I said gently. Don't spin it. You didn't forget me. You just didn't see me. Not really. Dad shifted. You didn't have to embarrass us. I turned to him. You didn't have to agree when Mason said I didn't belong. You didn't have to let me pay for everything without offering once. But you did. He flinched. I continued. Do you know how it feels to show up for everyone and be treated like the staff? Like you're not part of the joy, just the logistics. Silence. I stepped back, arms folded. I'm not asking for apologies. I'm just letting you know the door you pushed me out of, it doesn't swing back in that easily. Mom started crying softly. So what? You're cutting us off. No, I said. I'm just not going to sacrifice myself for a seat at a table where I was only ever allowed to serve. Dad didn't say anything. His jaw twitched. They left after 10 minutes. I stood at the window and watched them walk to their car. For the first time in years, I felt something settle in my chest. Not bitterness. Not triumph. Peace. And I knew. This wasn't a breakdown. It was a breakthrough. After that conversation with my parents, a strange quietness settled into my life. At first, it felt like a void, a space previously occupied by constant responsibility, guilt, and last-minute family emergencies. But as the days passed, that silence stopped feeling hollow. It started feeling clean. The absence of their voices, their assumptions, their needs. It was like a fog lifting after years of driving through a storm. I didn't realize how heavy it had all been until it was gone. The first week, I expected someone to break the silence. Mason, Mom, maybe even one of the cousins. But no one did. The group chat went cold. My name didn't appear in anyone's posts, stories, or sudden passive-aggressive memes. They didn't even ask where I went. At first, it hurt more than I cared to admit, that I could be erased so easily. But then came the clarity. I began to live my life without looking over my shoulder. No texts at 7 a.m. asking for help with paperwork. No Venmo requests labeled just until payday. No guilt trip emails with lines like, "You're the strong one. Can't you just handle this for us?" For the first time in years, I started making choices purely for myself. I painted the bedroom wall I'd left untouched for over a year. Bought a new bookshelf, an absurdly expensive one I'd always told myself was too much. Organized my closet. Cleaned out a drawer full of receipts for family purchases I'd never been reimbursed for. Burned them. One morning, I took a different route to work just because I felt like it. I stopped in a bookstore, browsed for an hour, and walked out with a novel I wasn't even sure I'd finish, just because the cover made me feel something. Little things. But they built a rhythm. And in that rhythm, I began to remember who I was before I became the designated problem solver. I started therapy again. Sat across from my old therapist, who blinked when I told her. I said no to my family. And I meant it. We talked about control, boundaries, financial trauma. She asked me when I first learned that my needs were secondary. I told her about Mason's high school graduation, how I skipped my own school competition because Dad said, "Your brother's day is more important." That's where it began, I realized. And for the first time, I didn't cry telling that story. I just let it sit between us like a healed scar. I reconnected with old friends. I'd ghosted most of them over the years. Always too busy. Always caught up in something family-related. I sent long texts. Apologized. Some replied instantly. Others took a while. But most were kind. We met up. Had awkward first coffees that turned into real conversations. They asked questions. Not about Mason, or my mom, or anyone else. About me. I couldn't remember the last time someone asked what I liked to do on weekends. I didn't even know how to answer. So I started exploring. Tried a painting class. I'm terrible, but it made me laugh. Went on a hike. Alone. Sat at the top of the trail, phone off, just breathing. And then, unexpectedly, came the message. Hey, this is Natalie. I know it's random, but can we talk? Natalie, my cousin Tom's ex-wife. We hadn't spoken in years. I remembered she disappeared from our lives almost overnight, right after the divorce. Mom said she was unstable. Mason said she was manipulative. I remembered thinking it didn't quite add up, but I stayed silent like I always did. She asked to meet for coffee. I said yes. When she walked into the cafe, I almost didn't recognize her. Not because she'd changed, but because she didn't have that hunted look anymore. She looked peaceful. She smiled, but her eyes were cautious. Thanks for meeting me, she said. I know it's weird. We sat. She sipped tea, stirred it 6 or 7 times before speaking. I heard what happened. With the reunion. And your family. I stayed quiet. She looked up. I need to tell you something. When I left Tom, no one believed me. They said I was crazy, that I had made it all up. But you sent me one message. I frowned. I did. She nodded. You said, I believe you. I'm sorry no one else does. I had completely forgotten. It was probably a 2-line text sent after one of Mom's lectures about family unity. Natalie exhaled. I never forgot that. You were the only one. And now, watching you walk away from them, it gave me strength. Because you were their stability. If you could say no, maybe I wasn't the crazy one after all. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. She reached into her bag, pulled out a flash drive. I think you need to see this, she said. It's from Mason's old laptop. He gave it to Tom when they worked together briefly. I'm guessing you didn't know they did? My stomach dropped. No. She slid it across the table. It's a lot. I don't know exactly what's in there. But I found stuff under your name. Invoices. Authorizations. Insurance claims. I blinked. Insurance. Yeah. For family events. Stuff with your signature on it. But you didn't sign them. That night, I plugged in the drive. At first, I saw nothing unusual. A few documents. An old resume. A folder labeled Event Planning. Inside, a list of vendors I'd worked with. But there were duplicates. My name. My phone number. But the routing numbers? Different. I opened the email threads. And there it was. I discovered reimbursements had been rerouted using my name, without my consent. Filing adjustments to vendors. Claiming overcharges. Redirecting funds. Always small enough not to trigger audits. Thousands of dollars. Over 5 years. Under my credentials. My liability. If anything had gone wrong, if a vendor had sued, if an accident had happened, I'd have been holding the bag. And he knew it. That's why he said, you don't belong anymore. Because the moment I stopped cooperating, I became dangerous. Until that moment, I thought the betrayal was emotional. Now it was criminal. The next morning, I called my lawyer. The day after that, I opened an inquiry with my provider to correct the records. I sent notices to every vendor involved. I sent a single text to Mason. You crossed a line. This isn't about family anymore. It's about misused trust and misfiled documents. He didn't reply, but my lawyer told me something interesting a few days later. Mason had already started trying to undo some of the transfers, which meant he knew I had proof, which meant I wasn't just walking away anymore. I was pulling down the curtain. I didn't hear from Mason after I sent that message. Not when the bank confirmed their fraud investigation. Not when my lawyer filed the official complaints. Not even when the State Insurance Commission opened a review into past family event reimbursements. He vanished. It was almost poetic. The man who once said, you don't really belong anymore, now had to live in a world where he didn't belong. Not in my finances, not in my future, not in my forgiveness. Weeks passed, then a month, then another, and then one day, I got a letter. Not an email, a real letter. Thick envelope. No return address. Inside, a printed note. No greeting. No sign-off. Just 4 words, centered on the page. I didn't mean to. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was exactly what I expected from him. No ownership. No apology. Just enough vague sentiment to make it about his regret, not my reality. I shredded it. My lawyer moved forward. Mason, facing multiple counts of misrepresentation and insurance fraud, signed a private settlement agreement under mediation. He returned just under $23,000 and permanently forfeited any future claim to my name, my accounts, or my records. It didn't make up for the years, but it was closure. And sometimes, closure isn't justice. It's just escape with dignity intact. My parents? Well, they split the roles they always had. Mom cried. Dad stayed silent. She left voicemails in the middle of the night, whispered ones, as if guilt could only be spoken in darkness. I don't know what to say, but we're still family. Please don't forget that. I didn't respond. Dad, to his credit, sent a check. A literal check. For $2,000. No note. Just his signature and the memo line. For everything. I never cashed it. I framed it. Sometimes, when I forget how far I've come, I look at that check. To him, a check seemed like enough to fix years of silence. But it bought me freedom. I changed my phone number. I stopped checking the old family email thread. I made peace with the fact that some people grieve the loss of control, not the loss of connection. I went deeper into therapy, not to process them, but to reconnect with me. I started working out again, not to punish my body, but to reclaim it. I invested in a small piece of land outside the city. Quiet, private, enough space to build a little studio, maybe a workshop. I began painting, for real this time. Not to impress, not for Instagram, just for me. My cousin Rachel, one of the few who didn't cut ties, stopped by last week. She brought banana bread and a six-pack. We sat on my porch and watched the wind move through the trees. You seem different, she said. I am different, I replied. She nodded, sipping her beer. You know, I always thought you were the strong one. I wasn't, I said. I just had to be. She smiled. Well, now you look free. And I was. Free from proving my worth. Free from playing the helper. Free from absorbing shame that was never mine to carry. Even Natalie, the cousin's ex-wife who gave me the flash drive, stayed in touch. We've become odd friends, bound not by trauma, but by survival. Sometimes we trade stories. Other times, we sit in silence, both understanding what it means to be the scapegoat who finally stepped out of the fire. A few months after the settlement, Mason tried one more time. He emailed from a burner address, said he was in a better place, that he missed the old times, that we should grab a beer. I didn't reply, but I printed that email too. Put it in the same folder as the letter and the check, not out of spite, but as proof. Proof that walking away wasn't abandonment. It was protection, from a family that took until I had nothing left to give, from a brother who betrayed me the moment my usefulness outlived his convenience, from parents who confused obligation with love. The last time I saw any of them in person was at the mediation meeting. Mason looked smaller somehow, not physically, but spiritually. His voice didn't carry. His eyes didn't meet mine. He signed the papers without protest. As I stood to leave, he looked up and said softly, "We're still brothers, right?" I paused. Then I said, "No, we were roles in the same broken play." And I've walked off stage. And then I walked out. Now, I don't miss them. Not the group chats. Not the obligations. Not the quiet resentment. Not the way they made me question whether my feelings had value. What I have instead is real. Friends who check in without asking for something. A therapist who says, "You're allowed to rest." A body that doesn't ache with unspoken grief. A life I built, not in reaction to them, but in the space they left behind. And that, I've learned, is the real legacy I get to leave. Not bitterness, not vengeance, but peace. The kind that isn't granted. The kind you claim.